My name is Julius Caesar. My name may have reached you through the centuries, carried by tales of battles, conquests, and ambitions. But tonight I would like to speak to you in a quiet voice, not as a general, but as a man. My life has been a series of difficult decisions, alliances, and dreams that seemed bigger than Rome itself. Make yourself comfortable. Let your breathing slow down, and allow me to tell you my story.
Welcome, settle in, and let me take you on a journey through time, back to ancient Rome, where the streets bustled with life and ambition, where the marble columns gleamed under the Mediterranean sun, and where one man's destiny would change the course of human history forever. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and allow yourself to drift back more than 2,000 years to a world both familiar and strange, where the fate of empires hung in the balance and where power, glory, and tragedy intertwined in ways that would echo through the centuries. On a warm summer day, either the 12th or 13th of July in the year 100 before the Common Era, in the crowded neighborhood of Suburra in Rome, a child was born who would grow to become one of the most influential figures the world has ever known. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar. The Suburra district where he first drew breath was far from the grand palaces and pristine villas of Rome's wealthiest citizens. It was a place of narrow, winding streets where the sounds of merchants hawking their wares mingled with the laughter of children playing in the dusty alleyways. The air carried the mingled scents of cooking fires, fresh bread from the bakeries, and the less pleasant odors of a densely packed urban quarter. Young Caesar's family belonged to the patrician class, that ancient aristocracy that traced its lineage back to the very founding of Rome itself. The Julian family, the gens Julia as it was known, claimed descent from Iulus, the son of the legendary Trojan hero Aeneas, who in turn was said to be the offspring of the goddess Venus herself. This divine ancestry would later become a powerful tool in Caesar's political arsenal. But in his childhood, it meant relatively little in practical terms. The Julii were noble in name but not particularly wealthy or politically influential in the Rome of Caesar's youth. His father, also named Gaius Julius Caesar, served as a praetor, a significant but not supreme magistrate in the Roman government. The elder Caesar governed the province of Asia, far from Rome, which meant young Gaius often found himself without his father's presence during his formative years. His mother, Aurelia Cotta, came from a more politically connected family, and it was perhaps from her that the young Caesar learned some of his earliest lessons in navigating the treacherous waters of Roman politics and society. Aurelia was known for her intelligence and strong character, qualities that she would pass on to her son. The Rome into which Caesar was born was a place of tremendous tension and frequent violence. The late Roman Republic was entering a period of crisis, torn between two competing visions of governance. On one side stood the optimates, the conservative faction that sought to preserve the power and privileges of the Senate and the old patrician families. On the other stood the populares, who sought to advance their political careers by championing the causes of the common people, often bypassing the Senate to appeal directly to the popular assemblies. This fundamental conflict would define the political landscape of Caesar's entire life. As a young boy, Caesar received an education befitting his patrician status. He was taught by private tutors, learning to read and write in both Latin and Greek. He studied the great works of literature and philosophy, the histories of Rome and Greece, the art of rhetoric and public speaking. Education in ancient Rome was not merely about acquiring knowledge, but about preparing young men for lives of public service and political leadership. Caesar proved an exceptionally bright student, showing particular aptitude for oratory and literary composition. Even as a child, his teachers noticed his quick mind and his ability to articulate complex ideas with clarity and force. The household in which Caesar grew up was modest by the standards of Rome's elite, yet it was a place where politics were discussed constantly, where the news from the forum was dissected and analyzed, where ambition was nurtured and encouraged. Young Gaius would have heard stories of his family's illustrious past, of the deeds of his ancestors, and of the divine favor that supposedly blessed his bloodline. These stories planted seeds in the boy's mind, dreams of glory and greatness that would drive him throughout his life. When Caesar was just 16 years old, tragedy struck the family. His father died suddenly while putting on his shoes one morning, according to the ancient sources. This unexpected loss thrust young Caesar into the position of head of the household, responsible for his mother Aurelia and his sister Julia. It was a heavy burden for one so young, but it also accelerated his maturity and his entry into the adult world of Roman politics and responsibility. The death of his father meant that Caesar would have to forge his own path without the patronage and protection that a living father might have provided. Shortly before or after his father's death, Caesar was nominated to become the Flamen Dialis, the high priest of Jupiter, one of the most prestigious religious positions in Rome. This appointment came through the influence of his uncle by marriage, Gaius Marius, one of the greatest military commanders Rome had ever known. Marius had married Caesar's Aunt Julia, and this connection to such a powerful figure would prove both a blessing and a curse for the young Caesar. To accept the position of Flamen Dialis, Caesar had to marry a patrician woman. He broke off his engagement to a plebeian girl and married Cornelia, the daughter of Lucius Cinna, a powerful ally of Marius and one of the leaders of the Populares faction. But the political tides in Rome were shifting dangerously. Marius and his faction were locked in a bitter struggle with Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a brilliant general who championed the cause of the Optimates. This conflict erupted into civil war, with armies marching on Rome itself, something previously unthinkable in Roman tradition. When Sulla emerged victorious from this bloody struggle, he declared himself dictator and began a systematic purge of his political enemies. His proscription lists named hundreds of men to be killed, their property confiscated, their families ruined. Anyone associated with Marius was a target, and that included the young Caesar. Sulla demanded that Caesar divorce Cornelia as a test of loyalty. It was a reasonable enough request in the brutal logic of Roman politics. Many men complied with similar demands, severing ties with the wrong faction to save themselves. But Caesar refused. This act of defiance, this loyalty to his young wife, showed a stubborn pride and an unwillingness to bow before threats that would characterize Caesar throughout his life. It also made him a marked man. Sulla ordered the confiscation of Cornelia's dowry and stripped Caesar of his position as flamen dialis. The young man, barely out of boyhood, faced the very real possibility of execution. Caesar made the difficult decision to leave Rome, to save his life by joining the military and serving far from the dictator's immediate reach. He departed for Asia Minor, leaving behind his mother, his sister, and his young wife. It must have been a bitter parting, filled with uncertainty about whether he would ever see them again, whether Sulla's wrath would extend even across the sea. But Caesar had chosen survival, and he would use his time in exile to prove himself in a different arena, the battlefield. In the military, Caesar discovered talents he perhaps did not know he possessed. He served with distinction in the campaign against Mithridates VI of Pontus, showing courage and tactical skill. At the siege of Mytilene, Caesar performed an act of exceptional bravery, saving the life of a fellow soldier in the heat of battle. For this deed, he was awarded the civic crown, the Corona Civica, a wreath of oak leaves that was one of Rome's highest military honors. This award could only be given to a soldier who saved the life of a Roman citizen in battle, and it came with significant privileges, including the right to wear the crown at public gatherings and the honor of having the entire Senate rise when the wearer entered their chambers. This military service was transforming the young patrician into a soldier and a leader of men. He learned how armies moved, how battles were won, how to inspire loyalty in his troops. These lessons would serve him well in the years to come, though at the time he could hardly have imagined the scale of the campaigns he would one day command. He also developed a reputation for personal courage that sometimes bordered on recklessness, a willingness to share the hardships and dangers of his men that would make him beloved by his soldiers throughout his career. After serving in Asia Minor, Caesar was transferred to Cilicia to serve on the staff of the military legate. This position gave him broader exposure to military administration and provincial governance. He saw firsthand how Rome extended its power across the Mediterranean world, how provinces were managed and taxed, how local populations were controlled or co-opted. All of this knowledge would prove invaluable in his later career as both conqueror and administrator. News reached him in Cilicia that Sulla had died in the year 78 before the Common Era. The dictator's death meant that Caesar could finally return to Rome without fear of immediate execution. But the Rome to which he returned was a changed and dangerous place. Sulla's reforms had strengthened the power of the Senate and the conservative Optimate faction. The political landscape was still treacherous for anyone associated with the old Populares party, and Caesar would have to tread carefully. Rather than immediately plunging into politics, Caesar decided to establish himself as an orator and advocate. This was a traditional path for ambitious young Romans, a way to build a reputation and cultivate powerful connections. He began prosecuting prominent figures for corruption and abuse of power, cases that allowed him to demonstrate his skills in rhetoric and legal argumentation. His prosecution of Gnaeus Cornelius Dolabella for extortion in his province was particularly notable. Though Caesar lost the case, his eloquent speeches impressed many in Rome and helped establish his reputation as a formidable speaker. In the year 75 before the Common Era, Caesar embarked on a journey to Rhodes to study rhetoric with Apollonius Molon, one of the most renowned teachers of the age. The same teacher had instructed Cicero, who would become Caesar's contemporary and occasional rival as one of Rome's greatest orators. But Caesar's journey to Rhodes would be interrupted by an event that has become one of the most famous stories from his early life. An episode that reveals both his audacity and his cold-blooded determination. As Caesar sailed across the Aegean Sea with a small retinue, his ship was attacked and captured by Cilician pirates. Piracy was a significant problem in the Mediterranean at this time, with well-organized bands of raiders preying on merchant vessels and wealthy travelers. The pirates recognized Caesar as a person of importance and demanded a ransom of 20 talents of silver for his release. This was a substantial sum, but not extraordinary for someone of Caesar's status. According to the ancient sources, when the pirates named their price, Caesar laughed at them. He told them that they had no idea who they had captured, that he was worth far more than a mere 20 talents. He insisted that they raise the ransom to 50 talents. This response was pure Caesar, transforming even his captivity into a demonstration of his own importance and superiority. The pirates, probably amused and certainly pleased at the prospect of a larger ransom, agreed. Caesar spent approximately 38 days as the pirates' captive while messages were sent and the ransom was assembled. During this time, he treated his captors with a remarkable mixture of friendliness and arrogance. He would participate in their exercises and games, compose poems and speeches which he would then recite to them, and generally behave as though he were the one in command rather than a prisoner. When the pirates failed to appreciate his literary efforts or seemed bored by his speeches, he would call them ignorant barbarians to their faces. Most remarkably, Caesar repeatedly told the pirates that once he was free, he would return with a fleet, hunt them all down, and have them crucified for their offense against him. The pirates took these threats as jokes, the bluster of a proud young man trying to save face in his captivity. They laughed along with him, not realizing that Caesar meant every word. The ransom was eventually paid, and Caesar was released. He immediately traveled to the nearest port, Miletus, and raised a small fleet. He then sailed back to the island where the pirates had their base, attacking them before they could disperse or hear of his approach. He captured most of them, along with the money they had extorted from him. Rather than simply reclaiming his ransom and leaving, Caesar was determined to make good on his promise. He had the pirates imprisoned at Pergamon while he consulted with the provincial governor about their punishment. When the governor proved hesitant to act quickly, possibly hoping to sell the pirates as slaves and keep the profit for himself, Caesar took matters into his own hands. He ordered that the pirates be crucified, the punishment he had promised them. However, in a gesture that he apparently considered merciful given their relatively kind treatment of him during his captivity, he had their throats cut before they were nailed to the crosses. This episode revealed a man who kept his word with an almost frightening literalness, who could be both gracious and ruthless, who would pursue vengeance but temper it with a kind of mercy. After completing his studies in Rhodes and returning to Rome, Caesar began his ascent through the cursus honorum, the sequential order of public offices that ambitious Romans pursued. In the year 69 before the Common Era, he was elected quaestor, a junior magistrate whose responsibilities typically involved financial administration. This position gave him a seat in the Senate and marked the beginning of his official political career. He was assigned to the province of Hispania Ulterior, further Spain, where he served under the praetor. It was during this time in Spain that two significant events occurred. First, Caesar's beloved wife Cornelia died, leaving him a widower with a young daughter, Julia. Caesar's grief was genuine and deep. When he delivered the funeral oration for Cornelia, he spoke with such emotion that many in the audience were moved to tears. This public display of genuine feeling for his wife was unusual for Roman men of his class who were expected to maintain a stoic composure. But Caesar never hid his emotions when it came to those he loved. The second significant event occurred when Caesar, then around 30 years old, saw a statue of Alexander the Great in a temple in Gades, modern Cadiz. According to Plutarch, Caesar wept before this statue. When asked why, he explained that Alexander had conquered the known world by the time he was Caesar's age, while Caesar himself had accomplished nothing of comparable note. Whether this story is literally true or a later embellishment, it captures something essential about Caesar's character and his driving ambition. He saw himself in competition not just with his contemporaries, but with the greatest figures of history. He wanted glory, immortal fame, achievements that would be remembered for all time. After returning to Rome and completing his term as quaestor, Caesar remarried, this time to Pompeia, a granddaughter of Sulla. This marriage was clearly political, designed to build bridges with the Optimate faction despite Caesar's own populares background. He continued his ascent through the political ranks, being elected aedile in the year 65 before the Common Era. As aedile, Caesar was responsible for organizing public games and festivals, a role that allowed him to curry favor with the Roman people. He spent lavishly on these entertainments, going deep into debt to provide spectacular gladiatorial games and theatrical performances. This debt would hang over him for years, but it also won him tremendous popularity with the common people of Rome. In the year 63 before the Common Era, Caesar achieved another significant political victory when he was elected Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. This was an enormously prestigious position held for life that gave Caesar religious authority to complement his growing political power. The election was contentious, with Caesar facing competition from older and more established politicians. He won through a combination of popular appeal and liberal use of bribery, reportedly taking on such massive debts to fund his campaign that he told his mother on the morning of the election that he would either return as Pontifex Maximus or not return at all, forced to flee Rome to escape his creditors. The year 63 was also marked by the Catilinarian conspiracy, a plot by the disaffected nobleman Lucius Sergius Catilina to overthrow the government. When the conspiracy was exposed, a debate raged in the Senate about how to punish the conspirators. The consul Cicero and others argued for immediate execution without trial. Caesar, in a famous speech, argued against this, pointing out that executing Roman citizens without trial violated fundamental legal principles. He advocated instead for life imprisonment and confiscation of property. His speech was so persuasive that it seemed he might carry the Senate, until Cato the Younger delivered a fierce rebuttal arguing for execution. The conspirators were ultimately executed, but Caesar's position on the issue won him additional popularity with the people while alarming many senators, who saw in his mercy a dangerous leniency toward those who would overthrow the state. By the year 60 before the Common Era, Caesar had risen to the office of praetor, another major step in his political career. But he was also drowning in debt from his various political campaigns and public expenditures. He needed wealth, and he needed it quickly. The traditional path to wealth for an ambitious Roman politician was through military command in the provinces, where opportunities for both legitimate gains and outright plunder were abundant. It was at this critical juncture that Caesar formed what would become known as the First Triumvirate, though the participants never called it by that name. This was an informal political alliance between three of the most powerful men in Rome: Caesar himself, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, known to us as Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the wealthiest men in Rome and indeed in the ancient world. Pompey was a brilliant general who had won victories across the Mediterranean, from Spain to the east, earning the honorific the Great in conscious imitation of Alexander. But despite his military successes, Pompey had struggled to translate his popularity with the soldiers into political power in Rome. The Senate, dominated by the conservative Optimates, viewed him with suspicion and had blocked his attempts to secure land grants for his veterans and to have his eastern settlement ratified. Crassus had made an enormous fortune through various means, including buying up property during Sulla's proscriptions and running what amounted to a private fire brigade that would negotiate prices with homeowners while their houses burned. He had also won some military glory by suppressing the slave revolt led by Spartacus, though this victory was somewhat tarnished when Pompey claimed credit for finishing off the rebellion. Crassus's relationship with Pompey was characterized by mutual jealousy and rivalry. Caesar needed the support and resources that alliance with these two powerful men could provide. Pompey needed political facilitation for his veterans and his eastern arrangements. Crassus wanted political influence to match his economic power and perhaps to check Pompey's growing prestige. The three men came to an agreement. They would use their combined influence to advance each other's interests, effectively dominating Roman politics through their cooperation. As part of this arrangement, Caesar was elected consul for the year 59 before the Common Era. During his consulship, he used every means at his disposal, legal and otherwise, to push through legislation favoring his allies. He secured land grants for Pompey's veterans and ratification of his eastern settlement. He obtained favorable tax arrangements for Crassus's business interests. For himself, he arranged to be appointed governor of not one but three provinces: Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum, with command over 4 legions for an initial term of 5 years. This governorship would prove to be the turning point of Caesar's career. Gaul, the region encompassing modern France, Belgium, parts of Germany, and northern Italy, was on the edge of the Roman world. It was a land of Celtic tribes viewed by the Romans as barbarians despite their sophisticated culture, advanced metalworking, and organized societies. For Caesar, Gaul represented an opportunity for the military glory and vast wealth that had so far eluded him. He was 40 years old, the same age at which Alexander the Great had died, and he was determined to finally achieve something worthy of the history books. Caesar took up his command in the year 58 before the Common Era. His initial justification for military action came from a migration of the Helvetii, a Celtic tribe living in what is now Switzerland. The Helvetii, feeling pressure from Germanic tribes to their north and east, had decided to migrate westward to new lands. To do so, they wanted to pass through Roman territory or through lands of Rome's Gallic allies. Caesar refused to allow the Helvetii passage through Roman territory. He claimed that the migration of such a large armed group posed a threat to Rome's interests and to Rome's allies. When the Helvetii tried to find an alternative route, Caesar pursued them with his legions. In a series of engagements culminating in a major battle near Bibracte, Caesar defeated the Helvetii decisively. Of the approximately 368,000 Helvetii who began the migration, according to Caesar's own account, only about 110,000 survived to return to their homeland. Caesar's Gallic Wars had begun, and they would continue for the next 8 years. Following his victory over the Helvetii, Caesar turned his attention to another perceived threat: the Germanic tribes led by Ariovistus, who had crossed the Rhine and were settling in Gaul. At the invitation of some, Gallic tribes, but to the alarm of others, Caesar arranged a meeting with Ariovistus to negotiate, but when talks failed, he moved against the German chieftain militarily. In a fierce battle, Caesar's legions defeated Ariovistus's forces, driving the survivors back across the Rhine. This victory established Caesar as the dominant military power in Gaul and sent a clear message to both the Gallic tribes and the Germanic peoples beyond the Rhine that Rome's reach was extending northward. The following year, 57 before the Common Era, Caesar turned his attention to the Belgic tribes of northern Gaul, peoples that Caesar described as the bravest of all the Gauls. The Belgae had formed a confederation to resist Roman expansion into their territory. Caesar moved quickly, using both military force and diplomacy to break up this coalition. He won several significant battles, including a hard-fought engagement against the Nervii, a Belgic tribe that nearly defeated Caesar's forces through a surprise attack on his camp. Only Caesar's personal intervention, rallying his troops and leading them into battle, turned potential disaster into victory. These early campaigns established patterns that would characterize Caesar's conduct of the Gallic Wars. He combined aggressive military action with careful attention to logistics and supply. He used intelligence gathered from friendly Gallic tribes and from deserters to understand his enemy's strength and plea. He demonstrated remarkable personal courage, often placing himself in the thick of the fighting to inspire his men. He showed strategic flexibility, adapting his tactics to different enemies and terrain, and he proved ruthless when he deemed it necessary, selling entire populations into slavery after particularly fierce resistance. But Caesar was also careful to maintain and expand his political position back in Rome even while campaigning in Gaul. He spent the winter months in Cisalpine Gaul, the northern part of Italy that was technically part of his province, where he could keep abreast of Roman politics and use his growing wealth to maintain his network of supporters in the city. He wrote regular dispatches to the Senate describing his victories, carefully crafted reports that magnified his achievements and justified his actions. In the year 56 before the Common Era, the informal alliance of the Triumvirate was showing signs of strain. Pompey and Crassus were feuding, and there was growing senatorial opposition to Caesar's command in Gaul. Caesar invited his two partners to meet him at Lucca, a town in Cisalpine Gaul, to reaffirm their alliance. The meeting resulted in a new agreement. Pompey and Crassus would serve together as consuls for the year 55, and they would use their office to extend Caesar's command in Gaul for another 5 years. In return, after their consulships, Pompey would receive the governorship of Spain and Crassus would get Syria, both provinces that offered opportunities for military glory and enrichment. This renewed alliance gave Caesar the security he needed to continue his conquests. In the year 55 before the Common Era, he launched 2 of his most spectacular military adventures. First, he built a bridge across the Rhine River, a feat of engineering that awed both his soldiers and the Germans on the opposite bank. The bridge was completed in just 10 days, a testament to the skill of Roman military engineers. Caesar led his legions across the river into Germanic territory, not to conquer, but to demonstrate Rome's power and to punish tribes that had aided Gallic resistance. After spending 18 days on the far side of the Rhine, he withdrew back across the bridge and had it destroyed, having made his point. Later that same year, Caesar launched the first Roman expedition to Britain. The island was mysterious to Romans, known mainly through traders' tales and rumors. It was said to be a source of tin and other valuable resources, and some Gallic tribes had received support from their British cousins. Caesar's expedition was more of a reconnaissance in force than a true invasion. He crossed the English Channel late in the campaigning season with 2 legions. The landing was contested by British warriors who fought fiercely on the beaches. Caesar's cavalry failed to make the crossing due to bad weather, leaving his infantry vulnerable. After some skirmishing and a demonstration of Roman military might, Caesar withdrew back to Gaul before winter storms could trap his forces in Britain. The following year, 54 before the Common Era, Caesar returned to Britain with a much larger force of 5 legions and 2,000 cavalry. This second expedition was more successful from a military standpoint. Caesar defeated the British tribes led by Cassivellaunus, crossed the Thames River, and imposed tribute on the conquered people. However, the expedition was marred by storms that damaged his fleet, and by news from Gaul of growing unrest among the tribes he thought he had pacified. Caesar accepted the submission of the British tribes and withdrew back to Gaul, leaving no permanent Roman presence on the island. These British expeditions, while militarily inconclusive, were propaganda victories that awed the Roman public. Caesar had led Roman legions to the edge of the known world and beyond, to mysterious islands wrapped in ocean mists. But the year 54 also brought personal tragedy for Caesar. His daughter Julia, who had married Pompey as part of the political arrangements of the Triumvirate, died in childbirth, and her baby died shortly after. Julia had apparently been genuinely loved by both her father and her husband, and her death removed an important personal bond between Caesar and Pompey. The alliance of the Triumvirate was beginning to fray, and Julia's death weakened one of the ties that held it together. The following year saw disaster and unrest in Gaul. An entire Roman legion, along with 5 cohorts, was ambushed and destroyed by the Eburones under their chieftain Ambiorix. This was the worst Roman military defeat since the battles against Germanic tribes decades earlier. The loss sent shockwaves through Caesar's army and encouraged other Gallic tribes to renew their resistance to Roman occupation. Caesar responded with characteristic decisiveness and brutality. He launched a series of punitive expeditions, particularly targeting the Eburones, seeking to make an example of those who had destroyed a Roman legion. Then, in the year 53 before the Common Era, the Triumvirate suffered another blow when Crassus, seeking military glory to rival that of his partners, launched an invasion of Parthia. The Parthian campaign ended in catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Carrhae. Crassus was killed along with most of his army. The Romans lost their standards, their most sacred military symbols, to the Parthians, a humiliation that would sting for decades. Crassus's death left only 2 members of the Triumvirate, and without him as a balance, the rivalry between Caesar and Pompey would intensify. The year 52 before the Common Era brought the greatest crisis of the Gallic Wars. The Gallic tribes, driven to desperation by years of Roman conquest and exactions, found a leader capable of uniting them in a common cause. His name was Vercingetorix, a chieftain of the Arverni tribe. Vercingetorix was young, charismatic, and strategically astute. He understood that the Gallic tribes could not defeat the Roman legions in set-piece battles where Roman discipline and organization gave them an overwhelming advantage. Instead, he adopted a strategy of scorched earth, burning Gallic settlements to deny the Roman supplies and avoiding direct confrontation in favor of harassing attacks. This strategy put Caesar in a difficult position. His army needed food and supplies, especially during winter, and Vercingetorix was systematically destroying the resources the Romans might seize. Caesar besieged the town of Avaricum, which the Gauls had initially wanted to destroy, but which the inhabitants pleaded to defend. When the town fell after a prolonged siege, Caesar's men, desperate from hunger and frustrated by the tough siege, massacred nearly all of the 40,000 inhabitants. It was one of the darkest moments of the Gallic Wars, a reminder of the terrible human cost of Roman conquest. Emboldened by his success in making the Romans' position difficult, Vercingetorix made the decision to defend the fortress town of Gergovia. Caesar besieged the town but suffered a humiliating defeat when an attack was repulsed with heavy Roman casualties. This was Caesar's most significant setback in Gaul, and it encouraged more Gallic tribes to join Vercingetorix's rebellion. However, Vercingetorix made a crucial strategic error. Rather than continuing his successful strategy of avoiding battle and denying the Romans supplies, he allowed himself to be drawn into a conventional siege. He withdrew his forces to the hilltop fortress of Alesia, a strong defensive position. Caesar, recognizing his opportunity, laid siege to Alesia with his full army. What followed was one of the most remarkable military achievements in ancient history. Caesar built 2 lines of fortifications around Alesia. The inner line, the Contravallation, encircled the fortress to prevent Vercingetorix from breaking out. The outer line, the Circumvallation, faced outward to defend against the Gallic relief army that Caesar knew would come to rescue Vercingetorix. These fortifications were elaborate and extensive, including trenches, ramparts, palisades, watchtowers, traps, and obstacles. The construction was completed with astonishing speed, a testament to the discipline and engineering skill of Roman legions. When the Gallic relief army arrived, numbering perhaps as many as 250,000 warriors according to Caesar's account, the Romans found themselves besieged while they were besieging Alesia. For days, Caesar's legions fought on 2 fronts, defending their lines against attacks from both the garrison of Alesia trying to break out and the relief army trying to break in. At the climax of the battle, with the defenses on the verge of being overrun, Caesar personally led his final reserves into the fight, rallying his exhausted men to one last supreme effort. The Romans held. The relief army was defeated and dispersed. Inside Alesia, facing starvation, Vercingetorix surrendered himself to Caesar, hoping to save his people from further slaughter. The surrender of Vercingetorix effectively ended major resistance to Roman rule in Gaul. The Gallic chieftain was taken to Rome in chains, held for 6 years, and finally paraded in Caesar's triumph before being ritually strangled, as was the Roman custom for defeated enemy leaders. The following years saw mopping up operations as Caesar pacified the last pockets of resistance and organized the conquered territories into Roman provinces. Gaul was now under Roman control, though it would take decades for the region to be fully Romanized. The conquest brought tremendous wealth into Caesar's coffers through plunder, tribute, and the sale of captives into slavery. It also gave him an army of hardened veterans intensely loyal to him personally. Men who had followed him for years through brutal campaigns and who looked to him for their rewards. But while Caesar was winning glory in Gaul, the political situation in Rome was deteriorating. The city had descended into increasing violence and disorder. Street gangs loyal to different political factions fought openly in the streets. The normal functioning of government was frequently disrupted. In the year 52, Pompey was appointed sole consul, an unprecedented step to restore order to the city. This appointment marked Pompey's definitive alignment with the conservative senatorial faction against the Populares party with which Caesar had always been associated. The death of Julia and the death of Crassus had removed the personal and political bonds that had held the triumvirate together. Pompey married again, this time to the daughter of Metellus Scipio, a leading Optimate. He was moving closer to the Senate and further from his old ally Caesar. Pompey and the senators who surrounded him began to see Caesar as a threat to their power and to the traditional republican system of government. As Caesar's command in Gaul was set to expire, a political crisis developed over what would happen next. Caesar wanted to transition directly from his provincial command to another consulship, maintaining his immunity from prosecution. There were laws that seemed to allow him to stand for consul in absentia, without having to give up his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. But his enemies in the Senate, led by figures like Cato the Younger and encouraged by Pompey, were determined not to allow this. Caesar made several offers of compromise. He offered to give up his armies if Pompey would do the same. He offered to retain only 2 legions in Cisalpine Gaul until he could stand for consul. But his enemies were not interested in compromise. They saw an opportunity to end Caesar's political career and perhaps to prosecute him for alleged crimes during his consulship 10 years earlier. On the first day of the year 49 before the Common Era, the Senate met in a tense session. A proposal that both Caesar and Pompey should lay down their commands was voted on and passed by an overwhelming margin of 370 to 22. But this vote was ignored by the consul Gaius Claudius Marcellus and by Pompey. Instead, the Senate passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the ultimate decree which effectively declared a state of emergency and authorized the magistrates to take any action necessary to protect the state. This decree was aimed at Caesar. He was ordered to disband his army and return to Rome or be declared an enemy of the state. When pro-Caesarian tribunes vetoed this decree, they were threatened with violence and forced to flee Rome for their safety. This gave Caesar the pretext he needed. The violation of the sacrosanct rights of the tribunes of the plebs, he would argue, required him to defend the republic and the rights of the people. In reality, Caesar faced a stark choice. He could obey the Senate's order, give up his army, return to Rome as a private citizen, and likely face prosecution and political oblivion. Or he could refuse the order and march on Rome with his army, an act of open rebellion. Caesar was at Ravenna with 1 legion when news reached him of the Senate's actions. He spent a day in apparent indecision, going about his business as usual, even attending a public event and examining plans for a gladiator school. But his mind was made up. He ordered his legions to gather at the Rubicon River, the boundary between his province of Cisalpine Gaul and Italy proper. Roman law was clear. No general could bring an army across that boundary into Italy. To do so was an act of war against the Republic. On the night of January 10th or 11th, 49 before the Common Era, Caesar and his 13th legion stood on the banks of the Rubicon. It was a small river, hardly an impressive geographical feature, but its legal and symbolic significance was enormous. Once Caesar crossed with his army, there would be no going back. He would be a rebel, an outlaw committed to civil war. According to the ancient sources, Caesar hesitated at this ultimate moment. Then he uttered words that have echoed through history. E acta alea est. The die is cast. He led his legion across the river and into Italy. News of Caesar's crossing sent Rome into a panic. Many senators and citizens, hearing exaggerated reports of the size of Caesar's force and remembering the terrible proscriptions of Sulla's civil war decades earlier, fled the city in terror. Pompey and most of the Senate abandoned Rome and withdrew south to Brundisium, intending to cross to Greece, where Pompey could raise an army from the eastern provinces. Caesar marched rapidly down the Italian peninsula, moving so quickly that one town after another submitted to him without resistance. The legions stationed in Italy, many of which had served with Caesar in Gaul, either joined him or offered no opposition. Caesar made a point of treating his enemies with clemency, releasing prisoners and pardoning those who surrendered. This clemency, which he called his new kind of conquest, was both politically astute and a genuine reflection of his preference to reconcile his enemies rather than destroy them. But Pompey escaped to Greece before Caesar could catch him. Rather than immediately pursuing Pompey across the Adriatic, Caesar turned his attention to Spain, where Pompey had 7 legions under the command of his lieutenants. Caesar famously said he was going to fight an army without a general before returning to fight a general without an army. In a brilliant campaign, Caesar outmaneuvered Pompey's forces in Spain, cutting off their water supply and forcing them to surrender without a major battle. With Spain secured, Caesar returned to Rome, where he was appointed dictator, allowing him to oversee elections in which he was elected consul for the year 48. Now Caesar crossed to Greece to confront Pompey directly. What followed was a campaign that demonstrated both the capabilities and the limitations of Caesar's genius. At Dyrrhachium, Pompey managed to break Caesar's siege works and inflict a significant defeat on him. Caesar's casualties were heavy and his position became desperate. But Pompey, perhaps overly cautious or influenced by the senators around him, failed to press his advantage. Both armies moved to Thessaly, and there on the plains near Pharsalus, they met in battle on August 9th, 48 before the Common Era. Pompey had the larger army with perhaps 45,000 infantry to Caesar's 22,000 and a significant advantage in cavalry. The senators with Pompey were confident of victory and were already arguing about who would get Caesar's possessions and positions after he was defeated. But Caesar was the better general, and his men were the more experienced soldiers. When the battle was joined, Caesar had prepared a special 4th line of cohorts specifically to counter Pompey's cavalry advantage. When Pompey's cavalry charged, seeking to outflank Caesar's right wing. These cohorts emerged and attacked the horsemen not with thrown javelins as was customary, but with their pila thrust upward at the riders' faces. The cavalry broke and fled. With the cavalry gone, Caesar's fourth line turned the flank of Pompey's main force. The battle became a rout. Pompey's army disintegrated with thousands killed and thousands more captured. Pompey himself fled the battlefield, abandoning his camp and his army. He made his way to the coast and took ship for Egypt, hoping to find refuge with the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII, whose father Pompey had once helped restore to the throne. But the Egyptian courtiers, calculating that Caesar would be the winner of the civil war and not wanting to antagonize him by sheltering his enemy, decided to kill Pompey. As Pompey's boat approached the shore, he was stabbed to death by men he thought were welcoming him. When Caesar arrived in Egypt a few days later, he was presented with Pompey's severed head as a gift. Caesar's reaction was not what the Egyptians expected. Rather than being pleased, he was horrified and grief-stricken. Pompey had been his enemy, yes, but also his former son-in-law and his former friend. Caesar wept openly and had the head taken away for proper burial. This may have been genuine emotion, or it may have been politically calculated outrage that foreigners had dared to murder a Roman of Pompey's stature, or perhaps a mixture of both. Caesar had come to Egypt with only a small force, planning to use Egypt's wealth to pay his troops and to settle the dispute over the Egyptian throne. He discovered a situation of Byzantine complexity. Pharaoh Ptolemy XIII, a boy of perhaps 13 or 14 years, was engaged in a civil war with his sister and co-ruler Cleopatra VII, a young woman of about 21. The Ptolemaic dynasty, descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals, had a long tradition of brother-sister marriages to keep power within the family, and Ptolemy and Cleopatra were both siblings and supposedly spouses. But Ptolemy's advisors had driven Cleopatra from Alexandria, and she was in exile raising an army. Caesar established himself in the royal palace in Alexandria and summoned both Ptolemy and Cleopatra to present their cases. Cleopatra, learning that Caesar had arrived, saw an opportunity to regain her throne if she could win over this powerful Roman. The problem was that the palace and the city were controlled by her brother's forces, and if she tried to enter openly, she would likely be captured or killed. According to the famous story told by Plutarch, Cleopatra had herself smuggled into the palace rolled up in a carpet or, in some versions, in a linen sack for bedding. When the bundle was unrolled in Caesar's presence, there was the Queen of Egypt. Caesar was apparently charmed. Cleopatra was not a classical beauty according to the ancient sources. Her attraction lay in her intelligence, her wit, her fluency in languages. She spoke perhaps 9 languages and was the first Ptolemaic ruler in 300 years to learn Egyptian. And her enormous charisma. A relationship began between the 52-year-old Roman general and the 21-year-old Egyptian queen. Whether it was primarily political calculation or genuine attraction is impossible to say with certainty, though the ancient sources emphasize the romantic and passionate nature of their affair. For Cleopatra, Caesar represented her best hope of securing her throne. For Caesar, Cleopatra offered not only personal pleasure, but also access to Egypt's legendary wealth, and the opportunity to place a friendly and indebted ruler on one of the richest thrones in the world. But when Caesar announced his decision to restore both Ptolemy and Cleopatra as co-rulers, executing his father's will, Ptolemy's advisors were outraged. They incited a mob against Caesar, and soon the Roman general found himself besieged in the palace area by an Egyptian army. What became known as the Alexandrian War had begun. Caesar was trapped with only about 4,000 men against a much larger Egyptian force. For months, the battle raged through the streets and harbors of Alexandria. During the fighting, fire spread from ships in the harbor to buildings along the waterfront, and some accounts claim that parts of the famous Library of Alexandria were destroyed in this conflagration, though the extent of the damage is debated by historians. Caesar fought with his customary courage and tactical brilliance, at one point jumping from a mole into the sea and swimming to safety, while holding important papers above his head. Finally, reinforcements arrived from Rome and from Roman allies in the region. With these additional troops, Caesar was able to take the offensive. He defeated Ptolemy's army in a battle along the Nile. The young pharaoh drowned in the river while trying to flee. Weighted down by his golden armor. With Ptolemy dead, Caesar placed Cleopatra on the throne along with her younger brother Ptolemy XIV, a child who posed no real threat to her power. With the political situation in Egypt resolved, Caesar spent time with Cleopatra, reportedly taking a luxurious cruise down the Nile on her royal barge. Some sources claim this cruise involved a fleet of 400 ships and would have continued all the way to the borders of Egypt if Caesar's soldiers had not refused to go so far from Rome and their own interests. During this time, Cleopatra became pregnant with Caesar's child, a son who would be named Ptolemy Caesar but called Caesarion. Little Caesar. But Caesar could not linger indefinitely in Egypt, however pleasant his time with Cleopatra might have been. News reached him that Pharnaces, the son of the old Roman enemy Mithridates, had taken advantage of the Roman civil war to invade Roman territories in Asia Minor. Caesar left Egypt, marched to confront Pharnaces, and defeated him with astonishing speed at the Battle of Zela. It was after this victory that Caesar sent his famous dispatch to Rome. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered, and I came, I saw, I conquered, I saw, I conquered. In just 5 days and one battle lasting only 4 hours, he had solved the problem of Pharnaces. But the civil war was not yet over. Pompey's supporters had regrouped in North Africa, led by Cato the Younger and Metellus Scipio. They had raised a new army and had the support of King Juba of Numidia. Caesar returned to Rome briefly before sailing to Africa to confront this new threat. The African campaign was difficult, with Caesar once again facing supply problems and enemies who had learned from previous defeats. But at the Battle of Thapsus in April of 46, Caesar won another decisive victory. Metellus Scipio died in the battle, and Cato, that stern defender of the old republic, committed suicide rather than live under Caesar's clemency. His death made him a martyr to the republican cause, and a permanent reproach to Caesar, who reportedly said he begrudged Cato his death. Still, the war continued. Pompey's sons, Gnaeus and Sextus, along with the former Caesarian general Labienus, who had defected to Pompey, raised yet another army in Spain. Caesar, though now in his mid-50s and perhaps growing weary of constant warfare, marched to Spain for a final campaign. At Munda in March of 45, Caesar fought what he later called the hardest battle of his career. For a time, the outcome was in doubt, and Caesar himself had to rally his men by dismounting and fighting in the front ranks. But eventually his veterans won the day. Labienus and Gnaeus Pompey were killed. Sextus escaped to continue a pirate war for years, but organized resistance to Caesar's rule was effectively over. Caesar returned to Rome in triumph in October of 45, before the Common Era. He celebrated 4 triumphs for his victories in Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. The celebrations were spectacular, lasting for days, with parades of prisoners, displays of plunder, public feasts and games. Cleopatra had come to Rome with Caesarion and was staying at Caesar's estate across the Tiber. Her presence in Rome was scandalous to many Romans, who saw her as a foreign temptress corrupting their great general. The orator Cicero wrote in a letter to a friend, "I hate the queen." With his position secure, Caesar set about reforming the Roman state. He had been appointed dictator perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity, effectively dictator for life. This was unprecedented and deeply alarming to those who cherished republican traditions. But Caesar used his power to implement a sweeping program of reforms. He reformed the calendar, replacing the old Roman lunar calendar with a solar calendar based on the Egyptian model. This Julian calendar, with minor modifications made later by Pope Gregory XIII, is essentially the calendar still used in the Western world today. The month of Quintilis was renamed Julius in his honor, giving us our July. He undertook massive building projects in Rome, commissioning new forums, temples, and public works. He planned to drain the Pontine marshes to cut a canal through the Isthmus of Corinth and to build a great library to rival Alexandria's. He reformed the currency, issued new laws regulating luxury and social conduct, and reorganized the grain dole to reduce the number of recipients. Caesar also reformed the Senate, expanding its membership from 600 to 900 and including men from Gaul and Spain, provoking the sarcastic comment from some old senators that newcomers would need to be shown the way to the Senate House. He appointed magistrates and allocated provincial governorships, concentrating more and more power in his own hands. But in accumulating all this power and accepting all these honors, Caesar was also creating tremendous resentment and fear. Some senators genuinely believed he intended to make himself king, a title that had been anathema to Romans since the overthrow of the last Roman king 500 years earlier. Others simply envied his power or felt pushed aside and humiliated by his dominance. A conspiracy began to form, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus. Brutus was particularly significant as a conspirator. He was the son of Caesar's longtime mistress Servilia and was widely rumored to be Caesar's own son, though this was probably false. Caesar had favored Brutus, forgiving him for fighting on Pompey's side in the civil war and appointing him to high office. That such a man would join a plot against Caesar shows how deep the opposition ran. Cassius was the principal organizer of the conspiracy, driven by both ideological commitment to the Republic and personal resentment at being passed over for positions he felt he deserved. The conspirators eventually numbered between 60 and 70 senators. They called themselves the Liberatores, the liberators, believing they were freeing Rome from tyranny. The conspirators debated about whether to kill Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal supporter and consul, along with Caesar. But Brutus argued against this, insisting that they should kill only Caesar, and that their action should be seen as tyrannicide, the removal of a tyrant, not as a political purge. This decision would later prove crucial to the failure of their cause. They chose the Ides of March, the 15th day of March in the year 44 before the Common Era, for the assassination. Caesar was scheduled to attend a meeting of the Senate that day, after which he would leave Rome for a military campaign against Parthia. If they were going to act, it had to be soon. The Senate was meeting not in its usual location but in the theater of Pompey complex in a meeting hall adjacent to the theater that Pompey had built. According to the ancient sources, Caesar received numerous warnings and omens before the Ides of March. A soothsayer named Suburra had warned him to beware of danger that would not pass until the Ides had come and gone. His wife Calpurnia had a nightmare in which she held Caesar's murdered body in her arms. The night before, at a dinner party, the conversation had turned to what kind of death was best, and Caesar had said, "A sudden one." On the morning of the Ides, Calpurnia begged Caesar not to go to the Senate. "The omens were bad," she pleaded. "Stay home." Caesar, who had some tendency toward superstition, was apparently inclined to listen. But Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators and one of Caesar's trusted friends, came to the house and convinced him that it would be shameful to let superstitious fears keep him from attending the Senate, that people would say he was ruled by his wife's dreams. Decimus assured him that all was well and escorted him toward the theater of Pompey. On his way, Caesar saw Suburra in the crowd, in what would become one of the most famous exchanges in history. Caesar called out to the soothsayer, "The Ides of March have come." Suburra replied, "Aye, they have come, but they have not passed." Caesar entered the Senate meeting, and the senators rose as he came in. The conspirators had positioned themselves around the room. One of them, Julius Caesar, approached Caesar under the pretense of pleading for his exiled brother's pardon. When Caesar refused, Caesar grabbed Caesar's toga and pulled it down from his neck, the signal for the attack to begin. A senator named Casca struck the first blow, aiming for Caesar's neck but missing and inflicting only a minor wound on his shoulder. Caesar, showing the warrior's instincts that had served him in countless battles, spun around and grabbed Casca's arm, stabbing him in the arm with his stylus, a writing implement that was at hand. But then the other conspirators rushed in, daggers drawn. Caesar tried to fight them off, but they came from all sides in a frenzy. He was struck again and again. According to the autopsy performed later by his physician, Caesar received 23 wounds. When Caesar saw Marcus Brutus among his attackers, he reportedly spoke his last words in the Greek that was the language of educated Romans. He said, "Kai su teknon," "You too, my child." These words, transformed by Shakespeare into the Latin "et tu, Brute," have become the epitome of betrayal's bitter sting. Caesar stopped fighting and pulled his toga over his head, either to preserve his dignity in death, or perhaps to not see the faces of those killing him. He fell at the base of a statue of Pompey, an ironic final resting place. The man who had fought so many battles, who had crossed the Rubicon and changed the world, died on the floor of the Senate at the hands of men who claimed to be defending the Republic. The assassins ran out into the streets of Rome holding their bloody daggers aloft, calling to the citizens that they were free, that the tyrant was dead, that the Republic was restored. They expected to be greeted as heroes. Instead, they were met with stunned, slender confusion and fear. The people of Rome did not celebrate. They locked their doors and shuttered their windows, unsure what would happen next. Mark Antony, who had been detained outside the Senate by conspirators assigned to keep him away, quickly took charge of the situation. He barricaded himself in his house at first, then negotiated with the assassins. A meeting was arranged in the Senate where, in a remarkable piece of political theater, a general amnesty for the assassins was voted, while Caesar's appointments and laws were confirmed. It seemed as though perhaps civil war could be avoided, but then Antony gave a funeral oration for Caesar that changed everything. playing on the crowd's emotions, displaying Caesar's bloody toga with its 23 knife holes, reading Caesar's will, which left gifts to the Roman people. Antony turned the mob's sentiment completely around. By the time he finished speaking, the crowd was in a fury against the assassins. They rioted through the streets, seeking out the homes of Brutus and Cassius to burn them down. The conspirators were forced to flee Rome for their lives. The aftermath of Caesar's assassination plunged Rome into another round of civil wars that would last for more than a decade. The ultimate beneficiary was not the Senate or the Republic, but Caesar's great-nephew and adopted son, Gaius Octavius, who would take the name Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus and eventually become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Octavian, only 18 years old when Caesar was murdered, proved to be a shrewd politician and a determined avenger of his adopted father. He formed an alliance with Mark Antony and Lepidus, the Second Triumvirate, which, unlike the first, was legally established with official powers. Together they hunted down Caesar's assassins. At the Battle of Philippi in Greece in 42 before the Common Era, the forces of Brutus and Cassius were defeated. Both committed suicide rather than be captured. The triumvirate then turned on each other. Lepidus was pushed aside. The struggle between Octavian and Antony culminated in Antony's alliance and love affair with Cleopatra, which Octavian used to portray Antony as a traitor seduced by an Eastern queen. At the Battle of Actium in 31 before the Common Era, Octavian's forces defeated Antony and Cleopatra's combined fleet. The lovers fled to Egypt where, faced with inevitable defeat, they both committed suicide. Caesarion, Caesar's son with Cleopatra, was hunted down and killed by Octavian to eliminate any rival claim to Caesar's legacy. With all rivals eliminated, Octavian stood supreme. In the year 27 before the Common Era, he received the title Augustus and became in effect the first Roman emperor, though he carefully maintained the fiction that he was merely the first citizen of a restored republic. The Roman Empire that would last for centuries had been born from the ashes of the civil wars that followed Caesar's death. Caesar's legacy extends far beyond the immediate political consequences of his life and death. He changed the Roman world fundamentally and irreversibly. The conquest of Gaul brought vast territories and peoples under Roman control, territories that would remain part of the Roman world for centuries. The Romanization of Gaul laid the foundation for the modern nations of France, Belgium, and Switzerland, and the Latin language Caesar's legions brought to Gaul evolved into French and the other Romance languages. Caesar's military genius is beyond question. His campaigns demonstrated masterful strategy, tactical brilliance, and the ability to inspire fierce loyalty in his troops. His commentaries on the Gallic Wars and the Civil War are not only invaluable historical sources but also masterpieces of Latin prose, studied for their style as well as their content. They influenced the development of military theory and practice for centuries. His calendar reform was remarkably successful. The Julian calendar, with its leap year system, was accurate enough to be used for more than 1600 years, before requiring the minor adjustments that produced the Gregorian calendar. The names of the months July and August commemorate Caesar and his successor Augustus. Perhaps most significantly, Caesar's life and death marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the imperial system. The concentration of power in one man's hands that Caesar achieved, while it led to his assassination, also demonstrated that one powerful individual could rule more effectively than the fractious Senate and competing magistrates of the old republican system. Augustus learned from Caesar's mistakes, wrapping his autocracy in republican forms and avoiding the appearance of kingly pretensions. But the substance of his power was every bit as absolute as Caesar's had been. Caesar's name itself became synonymous with imperial power. The title Caesar was used by Roman emperors and passed into other languages as Kaiser in German and Tsar in Russian, continuing to represent supreme autocratic authority long after the fall of Rome itself. In literature and popular culture, Caesar remains one of the most recognizable figures from the ancient world. Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar, has shaped the English-speaking world's understanding of both Caesar and the Roman Republic. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" has entered the language as an idiom for passing a point of no return. "Beware the Ides of March" remains a warning about impending danger. "Et tu, Bruti" expresses the pain of betrayal by a trusted friend. Historians and scholars continue to debate Caesar's character and motivations. Was he a power-hungry despot who destroyed the Republic to satisfy his own ambition? Or was he a reformer who saw that the old republican system was broken and sought to replace it with something more functional? Was his clemency toward his enemies genuine magnanimity or cynical political calculation? Did he intend to make himself king, or was he simply accumulating powers necessary to govern an empire that had outgrown its republican institutions? The truth, as is often the case with complex historical figures, is probably that Caesar was all of these things at different times or even simultaneously. He was certainly ambitious, driven by a hunger for glory and fame that he never attempted to hide. He was also capable of genuine mercy and friendship, showing clemency to former enemies and weeping for the death of Pompey. He was a brilliant military commander and a skilled politician. He was superstitious, yet also rational and calculating. He inspired fierce loyalty in his soldiers and friends, but also bitter hatred in his enemies. What is undeniable is that Caesar lived one of the most consequential lives in human history. Born into a declining aristocratic family, through his own talents, ambition, and ruthlessness, he rose to become the most powerful man in the known world. He conquered vast territories, accumulated legendary wealth, reshaped Roman politics, and died at the height of his power, murdered by those who feared he had become too powerful. His death did not preserve the republic his assassins claimed to be defending. Instead, it led to the very outcome they had hoped to prevent: the establishment of autocratic rule under the emperors who followed. As you drift off to sleep, imagine the streets of ancient Rome, the clash of gladiae and Gallic forests, the sight of legions crossing a small Italian river to change the world, the marble columns of the Senate House, where a great man met his end. Think of the decisions made, the battles fought, the friendships forged and broken, all in the life of one man whose name would echo through the millennia. Gaius Julius Caesar lived from July the 12th or 13th, 100 before the Common Era, to the Ides of March, March the 15th, 44 before the Common Era. In those 55 years, he changed the world. His life reminds us of the tremendous impact that individual human beings can have on the course of history, for good or ill. His story is one of ambition and achievement, loyalty and betrayal, mercy and cruelty, triumph and tragedy. If you've enjoyed this journey through the life of Julius Caesar, please consider subscribing to our channel and liking this video. Share it with anyone who loves history or who enjoys these relaxing explorations of the past. Leave a comment telling us which historical figure you'd like to learn about next. Until next time, rest well, dream of ancient times, and remember the lessons that history teaches us about power, ambition, and the human condition. Good night.